All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call this council workshop to order for Tuesday, February 3rd at 5 o'clock. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Any errors or omissions from the agenda is presented? None. Moved by Council Mears. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Council Moff. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. We have 3 sets of meeting minutes from the November 10th, November 25th, and December 2nd council workshops. Any errors or omissions is presented? Hearing none, it's been moved by Council Mears. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconder on the matter?
Second.
Seconded. Seconded by Council Pope. Prepared to call the question. All in favor, contrary minded? Second something you
I
move.
can if I want.
Can't do both. I would love to start off today by first welcoming Mike Fox, our new CAO, here on his first day with the District of North Vancouver. Welcome, Mike. We look forward to working with you. You've got big shoes to fill, but also I know you're quite capable and up to the task, and we're looking forward to getting to know you, building a relationship, and helping guide this community forward. So again, welcome on your first day.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's going to be easy.
Honeymoon's over. Now dealing matters at hand. Tonight, we're going to be dealing with council priorities and budget. And so, Mr. Dapper, can you start us off tonight?
Thank you, Mayor Little, and good evening, Council, and to members of the public listening in. And as you say, welcome to our new Chief Administrative Officer, Mike Fox. I met you for the first time today, and this is a great first day for me. And I'd also like to thank David Stewart, our longstanding CAO, for getting us this far. There's a lot of work that proceeded over the last 6 months, and so I think we're in a relatively good position. And this is the last workshop on the 2026 budget before the budget workbook is introduced to Council and the public on February 17th. And we'll move to the next slide. The goals for tonight are to provide an update on the strategies and adjustments required to balance the budget and to receive direction on the preferred scenario. The operating adjustments included in attachment 1 of the report reflect previous direction from Council from November 10th, and the capital adjustments highlights included in attachment 2 of the report reflect Council directions to date on the capital plan, including the use of the capital prioritization framework, which Council endorsed back in 2024. I think it's important to note that all of the adjustments impacting our partner agencies have been reviewed and supported by those boards and commissions. This budget does address concerns around affordability while continuing to address the infrastructure deficit and delivering the services the community needs. It creates more certainty by focusing on the things we can control and by preparing for the things that we can't. This presentation will take approximately 10 minutes, and I'll focus on the strategies, risks, and our financial health before turning it back to Mayor Little. Next slide. Next slide. I've covered this one. Next. Yeah. We are, in terms of the timeline, we're currently midway through this year's process. On November 10th, Council provided general support for staff to continue developing the budget based on a 3.5% tax increase. Since then, Council has provided additional direction through the approval of the utility rates and the fees and charges. Following tonight's workshop, the budget workbook will be introduced to Council and the public on February 17th. Public input will begin on February 18th, and Council deliberations are scheduled for March 9th. Next slide. You'll remember this slide was presented on November 10th, and it highlighted the external factors that continue to impact municipalities, which are largely outside of our control. Council does have control over service levels and has provided general support for the proposed property tax increase. Next slide. These budget drivers were also presented on November 10th and now reflect the 4% reduction to achieve the target tax increase of 3.5%. Climate change, new legislation, protective services, collective agreements, and growing demands of technology all contribute to cost increases above general inflation or CPI. In addition, cost overruns associated with North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant will continue to drive up utility rates over the next several years. Rate increases will be stabilized over this period through the use of district reserves. Next slide. So on the same night, this slide was presented as a reminder of the three options that were considered by council, and scenario one was selected, and that scenario shows some reduction in services, modest reductions, and manageable reductions, and a 3.5% tax increase. Next slide. These were the budget strategies that received general support from council on November 10th. There were some minor adjustments since then. Staff have, through council direction, there's two things that were changed. Staff worked collaboratively to identify the adjustments in this list, and the list of adjustments were focusing on the items with the greatest financial impact and least impact on our services. The adjustments identified are ongoing in nature and result in annual savings of approximately $5 million. Details on the adjustments can be found in attachment 1 on pages 35 and 36 of the agenda package. And before we go to the next slide, I just want to mention I think there's been a bit of discussion on senior government downloading and what that looks like, and Coquitlam's reported on it, other municipalities have reported on it. I don't know that downloading is the right word, but definitely the new legislation and the gray line in social services and housing makes it seem that way, and absolutely has impacts on us. We have not prepared a statement on how we feel we're financially impacted over the last number of years. Coquitlam has just done that, so it might be something that we should look at just to start tracking that. Next slide. Since council support of budget scenario 1, staff have also updated the capital plan. Did this based on council directions, the capital prioritization framework, which I believe is on page 37 of your package, and the affordability limits. So we look out to the future, we look at the fund balances, we look at the debt limits that were discussed with council previously, and we work within those affordability limits, that capital prioritization framework and council directions. You can see on this slide, grand total is $107 million. That was adjusted. So under budget scenario 1, key capital projects proceed to construction in the near term, while other projects are slowed, reduced in scope, or deferred to later years to remain within the available fund. We did do something a little bit different this year. We thought it was important to enhance the transparency on our capital needs. There has been some discussion about what we must do and what we should do and what we'd like to do. So we prepared a scenario based on what we should do according to our asset management plans and best practices. So that's what that 107 million represents. Staff prepared a plan, and following those practices, we should be investing 107 million more. That was the should do scenario over the next 5 years. So that 107 million represents 17 of that plan. Most of this variance relates to the work on that should be done on our facilities. So there is some flexibility with that. We are the teams are looking at extending life, et cetera, but it's a real issue with our facilities, and those issues are being addressed through the strategic facilities plan. The budget does include a provision to advance some of the near-term work on that plan, including work on our libraries, the replacement of park washrooms, and extending the service life of the Lynn Valley Fire Hall. As this work is still under review, staff are intending to bring forward additional details on these projects through the spring financial plan amendments. Right now, there's only a provision for that interim work in the plan, so it shows it as one line. If the council likes, we can provide an update through the budget process on that, but our intention right now is just to bring forward an amendment once that interim work is completed and provide an update in the spring. And then just to point out, the longer-term view on our facilities will be reviewed with the Finance and Audit Committee this July, including the funding strategies that we're looking at to bring that plan into balance over the next 10 years. Next slide. So these next few slides share highlights from the capital plan. Additional details on these highlights can be found on page 40 of the agenda package. The 5-year capital plan includes significant investments in active transportation and streets infrastructure and positions the district to prepare for TransLink's new bus rapid transit line to the North Shore. Housing projects are expected to increase our social and supportive housing by approximately 100 units per year. So there's 3 projects in stream and provisions 2 more. The risks are reduced through management of hazard trees, shoreline restoration, work on geohazards, and wildfire mitigation programs. There are an additional 3 artificial turf fields, 2 being completed, 1 in Handsworth and 1 in Inter River, and a gravel field will be converted to artificial turf as well. Next slide. Fire Hall 5 is planned to be replaced and expanded to meet the growing needs of the Lionsgate Lower Capilano community, and critical facility projects are advanced, including important planning work on our community recreation centers, need to be expanded, in some cases replaced, as well as on our libraries, parks, and civic facilities. And as mentioned earlier, there is an interim provision for works in the strategic facilities plan within this budget. And you'll get an update on that through the spring. And finally, we continue to modernize the district's business applications and make ongoing investments in our digital transformation. Next slide. So this is an important slide. It's beyond 2026. Unfortunately, our crystal ball says the cost pressures will continue at least into 2027 and remain above general inflation or CPI levels. Achieving balanced budgets from 2027 to 2030 will require ongoing efficiencies and savings in the range of 1% to 2% annually. There's a lot of unknowns still, so we'll provide another update on what that looks like in the middle of next year. The good news is that's about half the rate of what we've been experiencing over the last 2 years. So it is coming down, and beyond 2027, we expect it to get a little bit better yet. So we have, over the last couple of years, started financial review processes and to make sure that we're connecting more regularly. And those financial reviews will place greater emphasis on identifying emerging financial risks and implementing mitigation strategies, as well as setting aside funds where appropriate to manage those risks. And the last couple of bullets here, infrastructure plans will definitely need to be updated following the upcoming OCP amendments. So the one that's happening this June, following that amendment, we'll need to update those plans, as well as to continue to update those infrastructure plans to address climate-related impacts on our infrastructure. Next slide. As we look to the future, these indicators will help staff, council, and the public know if we're on the right track and in good financial health. The budget booklet will include additional information and numbers on these things, but I'll just cover them words for now. Our property tax strategy continues to be based on tax rate competitiveness, which is designed to attract and retain the district's industrial and commercial base. The district continues to maintain one of the lowest average increases in municipal taxes over the last 10 years. That's something that we'll continue to produce through our annual planning and reporting. The budget continues to maintain financial flexibility to address future and changing capital needs, with debt servicing estimated to reach about 5% of tax revenue in 2031. So there's more flexibility for future capital investment. And in order to look beyond just infrastructure and whether or not we're able to achieve the OCP vision, the official community plan vision, the 10-year rolling financial plan will evaluate whether or not that's affordable and develop strategies to close those funding gaps and strengthen our financial resilience. That work brings more clarity to what we're aiming for, what our target levels of service are, and what we can afford. So we'll be bringing that work back through the Finance and Audit Standing Committee to get initial feedback on that and bring that back to council either later this year or into the new year. See how far we get. It's a complicated look and there's a lot of work to do. Next slide. So this process, following tonight, leads to introducing the budget workbook on the 17th, gathering input from the public, providing a summary of that input to council before its upcoming deliberations on March 9th. We also meet with the community associations. We'll be doing that on February 18th to brief them on the budget and gather their input. Next slide. Just to wrap it up, in summary, we're seeking council direction on the strategies and adjustments presented this evening in order to proceed with introducing the budget workbook on February 17th. The process does include opportunities for both council and the public to review the budget, ask questions, and provide input in advance of council deliberations on March 9th. I recognize that the details that everyone's interested are coming February 17th, and so the purpose of tonight is just to gain consensus on the approach, the additional adjustments that we're making to the capital plan, and move forward with that meeting on the 17th and introducing that plan. So with that, thank you, and I'll turn it back to Mayor Little.
Thank you very much, Rick. I'm just going to say, I know you gave that warning about future challenges. So we'll be at about $90 million in debt by 2029 in long-term debt, which is a very manageable number for us. But I think your prediction for the next 5-year financial plan after that was that if we were to maintain a state of good repair and didn't have some dramatic new source, that we were going to be in and around $400 million in debt. And so that's to put a number on what you were saying about future facility management and replacement challenges, that we have a fairly large burden coming that we need to plan for and prepare for.
That's true. I wouldn't call it a $400 million debt. There are different ways to address that gap. And staff even today are still poring over the numbers, trying to get information out as quickly as we can. Normally we would produce that information in the middle of the year through finance and audit like we did this year. But we are pushing for those numbers, and we hope to include them in the budget workbook. And the number that you mentioned is what where it's at right now, and maybe even a little bit more, because of the atmospheric river rent and that impact on our stormwater infrastructure.
We're seeing similar, although higher in the first 5 years, obviously, for Metro Vancouver, where Metro Vancouver's predicting one amount in the next 5 years, and then 5 years after that, some of the predictions are absolutely massive.
Yeah.
Are we seeing other jurisdictions giving a sense of what future, 5 to 10 year outlooks are like for the other municipalities in the region? Are others reporting that, or?
Yeah, we've got a small group that works with the province on looking at long-range financial planning and asset management planning, setting standards for that. So we have Coquitlam involved in that, ourselves are involved in that, and others. It's a small group of about 5 municipalities. And there's a lot of work to do. I think this organization should be proud of the work that it does, and the fact that I know we got an email from a member of the public on maybe this isn't as transparent as we should be at this point, but I think we should be proud of the fact that we can state a number like the one you just stated. It's hard to do that. And so the objective here is just to keep the plan rolling, keep it as current as possible, address as best we can what the future looks like. We want to extend, we're currently at 10, we need to extend to 20 years because of the housing legislation. But we want to anyway, it's just good planning.
You mentioned the collaboration with the other municipalities and other finance officers in the process. I know you were working on trying to get the province to sort of recognize where municipalities were at in terms of their asset management within their municipality, so that it would give us a bit of a benchmark to compare.
Yeah.
Naturally, people look at us and compare us to the other municipalities, and so is there any advancement on that? Is the province going to be using asset management as a way to measure the health of an organization?
There's a meeting scheduled in the next couple of weeks for us to talk about that. And they definitely want our help to make that happen. We have meetings at Metro Vancouver through the Regional Finance Advisory Committee on advancing that work. And so generally, we work very closely with Coquitlam, and ideally, the provincial plans follow through, and we'll start to see provincial reporting by 2030, but we'll see what happens.
I'm happy to keep asking finance questions, but I'm also looking at council. Would anybody, yep, Councillor Pope, go ahead.
I have some questions and then I have some comments, so let's restrict it to questions for now.
It's a workshop, so it's kind of wide open.
I just want to go through a few of these items. One is the Affordable Housing Fund, 24.8 million. We know these are fully funded projects, so what is the what are you including there for the 24.8 million?
So the planning for those projects relates to servicing, so infrastructure servicing, as well as waive charges. We need to keep the municipality whole on those charges, so they're currently in the range of $45,000 per unit, and then anywhere from a few thousand to 5,000-10,000 per unit for the infrastructure servicing. That's what our experience has been, but every project is unique. So those plans reflect our best estimates at this time.
So basically for the infrastructure, the long-term infrastructure servicing costs of affordable housing. Which sort of raises the question, like, we often refer to this infrastructure funding gap. And yet, as I understand it, we still don't have any dollar amount on that. Is that correct, or do you?
We do. We reported through the State of the Assets report last year. It's just over $24 million per year, which is the reason why this target tax increase includes 1.5% to address that gap. That should help us get much closer to our target funding level over the next 10 years. And as I was mentioning earlier, we look at this number every year and we refresh that gap. And so we're hoping to include an update on that in the budget workbook in a couple of weeks.
Okay, I feel that this strategy correctly acknowledges the economic uncertainty many residents and businesses are facing and the very real affordability challenges in our community. So I support the 3.5% tax increase, as it's the right decision in that context. However, I want to highlight that one of the biggest drivers of district costs is the $3 billion cost overruns at the North Shore Wastewater Treatment Plant, as you mentioned. This year, we used 16 million in reserve funds to soften the blow for taxpayers, but the numbers going forward are staggering and continue to be. North Shore households will see their annual utility bills triple by 2030, totaling $21,000 per household over 30 years, largely due to Metro Vancouver's mismanagement. And last week, we learned there are additional design problems, and yet Metro's board continues to block a full independent audit. Because of that mismanagement, the district is now forced to find ways to reduce spending and extract more value from our services and assets. So as for the strategy here, I support the strategy listed here, in particular at number 3, creating more value out of district services and assets. But I believe we could and must go further. One glaring example of how we could be more efficient internally is the $260,000 reserve fund for a Lynn Valley Youth Center, which has been sitting unused for over 2 decades. A year ago, council asked for options, and yet today we are still talking about barriers rather than solutions, despite available space and viable interim approaches. That is not a good use of time or money, and to that end, I would like the budget workbook to include an additional $25,000 that Lynn Valley Services Society has requested that would mean the difference between opening a temporary youth center this year or nothing. Also, if we are serious about affordability and fiscal responsibility, we must think beyond using simple tools like freezing staff vacancies, and that includes applying political pressure, including suspending or challenging the payments we make to Metro until Metro Vancouver's Board of Directors stops blocking a full independent audit of the wastewater project. I'd like to see us review senior management compensation and benefits to ensure they are reasonable and defensible. And I'd really like to see us, as I've often mentioned, more fully embrace artificial intelligence and process reform. And I wondered if that was included in the budget for IT that's in here. I think it's 17.3 million. I think we could explore more ways to improve housing affordability in our community that actually costs us nothing. I'd like to see the Housing Affordability Fund used for things other than just bricks and mortar. For example, Holly Byrne's new program that links seniors to shared housing with other seniors. They need help promoting it. We could even use our communications channels to advertise it. And finally, I feel like we must move beyond talk and take action on legislative change. A focused committee, council committee, should actively lobby the province and the federal government on issues like the port's property tax, which alone could restore 4.6 million annually to district revenues. And I just want to remind everyone that the public engagement throughout the last few years has been very, very clear. Residents want recreational facilities, youth services, outdoor amenities, and active transportation, and they want delivery, not endless process. If we reduce unnecessary bureaucracy and modernize how we work, I believe we can deliver the priorities we've repeatedly promised. Those are my comments for now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Daniel, any comment or carry on?
Well, I can offer staff to get together regularly to assess where they are with their services, what adjustments can be made, what new innovative practices can be introduced. The recent challenging environment over the last 2 years has definitely pushed us into that spot a little bit more, and so we've had to do that. So we've built that discipline within the organization now, and so we've got that structure within our quarterly reviews where we look at opportunities, we manage risk, and we think outside the box a little bit more, and we track those ideas. So but I understand what you're saying, and there's always room for more.
Councillor Hanson?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Pope, for your comments. Thank you, Mr. At my request, you provided, and has been circulated to council, some ideas for additional funding sources. We were talking about a growing infrastructure deficit. We were talking about taxes going up and the need for service levels to go down. And of course, a way of, and we're talking about obviously Metro charges continuing to go up. If we could find new funding sources, I think we can all agree that that would be a hopeful development in terms of our budget. And so some ideas that you provided in your response to me, which has been circulated to council: complete review of outdoor sports and recreational facilities, update development charges following OCP amendment, explore land development, Affordable Housing Corporation, improve return on investment on facilities, longer term through renegotiation agreement, and introduce a sponsorship policy. So some ideas for new funding sources. I wonder if you could discuss those at all, or give us some sense of the order of magnitude and how much any of that could serve to offset this growing infrastructure deficit that you're describing for the years ahead.
I'm glad to. But the first one, on the review of outdoor sport recreation fees. That one has been going on for a little while now. We did a baseline assessment on what our cost recovery was a long time ago. And I believe we were recovering 10 to 15% of the cost when it came to just the sports fields. So this review is looking broader than that, for good reason. And when this review started many years ago, it started by saying that an appropriate target might be in the range of 25% cost recovery per year. It wasn't a lot per player, and that was easily in the $500,000 a year in a difference. So that's something that we're looking at. It would require additional resources to make sure that a new booking system was supported, but you get much better utilization, I think, out of the assets, and you'd likely get increase in funding through those fees and charges. So that's one. What was the second one, Councillor Hansen?
Update development charges following OCP amendment?
Right. So I know there's pushback from the federal government on this. It hasn't come through and the details yet. We've been told that perhaps there's going to be strings attached to grants now if we don't reduce development charges. But the fact is, if you look at the infrastructure that we have today and all of the homes that it supports on a per home basis, where the infrastructure value is at about $100,000 a home, and the development charges are at $45,000 a home. That's just the nature of development charges. If you take a moment in time and you only look at the infrastructure that's required to support that development over that period of time, you don't look at life cycle costs of infrastructure. So there is room to move on those charges, even though we're at $45,000 an apartment. It's still less than 5% of the development costs in a typical project. So that's an area to look at, and just the mix within those charges could also be looked at. To the point earlier, the community's needs are changing, and so you might be able to even keep charges the same and just improve and focus on where the investments need to be. So that's one that we'll be looking at after the June OCP amendment. And then, sorry.
Explore land development affordable housing corporation.
Right. So there was good discussion on that at the UBCM. Preston Housing Corporation was used as an example, so along with Whistler, others as Capital Regional District. And so there are good examples out there of housing corporations. And even though it's small, the one in Preston is interesting. They don't rely on any taxpayer funding. It's self-sustaining. I'm hoping to get the model to see how it's all been structured and learn more about it. But certainly if we could move forward with an initiative like that, it doesn't require direct taxpayer funding, that can help us move forward with our affordable housing, is worth looking at. So that's another one.
And improve return on investment on facilities.
So Ms. Chevalier has done a lot of great work on the strategic facilities plan. Part of that is working with the properties department and the rest of the organization for sure, but the properties department manages the lease agreements for facilities that we lease out, and there are a number of them where we should be charging commercial rates. We always try to get as close to market as we can. It's a hard thing to do sometimes, and so we could just manage that process a little bit tighter. When I look at those agreements, we could also look at divesting, and that could be tens of millions of dollars in savings, and not having to set aside money for replacement, because there's not a lot of public benefit there. Maybe there are strategic interests, so maybe we keep them and go to market, but there's definitely things we can do to save money through that strategic facilities plan. Focus on commercial properties.
Okay, thank you. And then last on this list that you provided was sponsorship policy.
Right, I know there's been interest in that in the past. We have a draft policy created, and I believe we're planning on bringing it forward through senior management in the first quarter. So that's something that we're looking at. We're also refreshing the donations policy. There's been lots of discussion through partner agencies, so library, recreation, et cetera. There are municipalities that have donations more focused on their webpage. So when you go to do payments, it's there and it's top of mind, and it's easy to make donations when you want to, where you want to. And so we haven't done that. So that's something that we'll be looking at as well.
Okay, thank you for all that.
Councillor Hanson, Councillor Miriam.
Wow. A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting, Coquitlam, I'm just looking at their report. They've determined 37.6 million in provincial government downloading from 2021 to 2024. You know, the word downloading has been used since I was first elected. We've been downloading. We used to fight it feverishly. And then we just kind of, you know, never got anywhere. So we just kept accepting it. And so for Coquitlam to try to absorb, you know, 18%, I do think that we need to understand it because it is getting worse, not better. And I do think we should understand what the last 30 years has looked like in regards to downloading. And, you know, we're being asked to do more with less. And then recently we've had our powers taken away from us. And that impacts us. You know, I'm listening to everybody. I mean, sorry, Councillor Hanson, you get me a little bit riled up when you start talking about land development. I think that's how I got here, was stopping land development and land sales. And I would say that someone quite wise many years ago said, you know, land development or selling land as a government is like selling pieces of your backyard to pay off your credit card. It's not really sustainable. So you may sell those properties or decommission them or, you know, take them off your books and use that money to improve something else. But at the end of the day, you still have to look after the asset to the future. And I think, you know, anybody that's in a privileged financial state will say that selling off assets is not what they do. They leverage their assets to help them move forward. So I think we'd have to have a really big conversation. Most of the land in the district is in the Seymour. Most of that is identified as parkland that was once areas that were identified for development that are no longer for that. And I'm, you know, the recreational list, we talk about recreation and improving what people want. And I think they'd have a lot to say about that. So I think we'd have to approach that carefully. You know, you could look at, and somebody asked me this today, where are the CACs from the Anthem project on Mount Seymour Parkway gone? And how much were they? We've built a very, very dense development. One of the densest in that community is the Anthem project, and there's no recreational support within the actual development for the people that live there, except across the street at Ron Andrews. And Ron Andrews is like packed, and we've been taping it together for many, many years. So I see, you know, that we're always looking to, get more out of district services and assets, adjust services to match demand and resources, respond to senior government downloading. You know, I don't know how we're going to do that. Pursue changes to legislation, again, challenging. Achieve additional efficiencies. Mr. Koss sent in an email today. He did a little AI scan on this report. And it talked about, you know, is this really a lot of these efficiencies, or is it about deferring into future years?
No.
Can you comment on that? Because that's, I think, what he got out of, you know, the report, that we're looking at how much of it would be deferral. There's got to be some. And how much is it just clearly finding those efficiencies and maybe pivoting away from goals that we may have had, recognizing we can't achieve them anymore.
So there's two parts to it. One is on the operating side, the team has identified ongoing savings. They will be hard to implement, but they've identified that $5 million in ongoing savings. On the infrastructure, it's a much longer term strategy, and I think the comments were, we're masking something and we need to be more transparent. And I suppose when you look at the package, we didn't include comments like Mayor Little included a little earlier, that it's a $400 million problem. So there's some truth to that, but it is a moving target, and we're looking at updating those numbers. This council has supported addressing the growing infrastructure deficit. So that's a first step, and there's a number of other strategies that need to be brought forward in order to address that and put us on a more sustainable financial path. So that work does lie ahead of us, but we are making progress on the issue.
A few years ago, when we had the budget, we talked about service levels.
Yes.
And the statement in the budget plan was service level.
Yes.
And the definition of service level to you was a little bit different
Yes, it
to
is.
me.
Yes.
And you ultimately changed that definition, did you not? Because you were looking at it from the perspective of the service level of the OCP
Yes.
and the vision of the OCP and moving forward.
Mhm.
My definition of service levels was keeping the snow off the streets when the winter comes, mowing the lawns, making sure we've got, our garbage utility departments picking up garbage and making sure that things are looked after.
Yeah.
And so I have to go back to that regularly, because I think that we need to understand where we are to understand where we're going.
Yeah.
And this OCP, is a living document and is subject to change, but I often feel that it's written in stone and that we have to achieve the final version of this document at all costs. And I know that that's what's creating the issue of affordability in our community. Those things that we achieve through ACCs or CACs or whatever we're gonna call them this week, become to be depreciating assets on our books, and we have to replace them. And I think a really good example, Mayor Little, is one of the first developments on the Parkway at Apex, Mount Seymour Parkway, and they put in as a piece of public art this big, huge wood and metal swirly piece of art right at the entrance of the driveway. And now that is becoming I understand, a $200,000 need to be addressed by the Strata Corporation. Because it becomes theirs and the Strata is responsible for it. And so I look at that in the same vein that I look at the assets that we're acquiring through development and what are those going to cost future taxpayers. And yet we want to continue to realize that vision that is living, is supposed to pivot, and it was just a creation, 15 years ago by a group of people that thought we should have some more density in our community. So I still don't feel like we're living within our means necessarily. We're looking at, more paid parking, increasing fees, finding new sources of revenues, and still trying to achieve a vision that, may ultimately need to be visited at another point in the future, because right now we have to get our own financial house in order.
Yeah.
And I still don't feel like we're there. I mean, a 7.5% increase on the utility, and yeah, we don't know what Metro Vancouver is going to do. That's a board decision. That's a political decision. The politicians around that table didn't want to help us. They chose not to spread it across the board. And that was a political decision by Coquitlam and Port Coquitlam and Burnaby and Richmond. And that was unfortunate. So because there's that uncertainty going forward, we have to keep our tax rates as low as we can. And I think we all around this table need to understand what the team is talking about in regards to priorities and, revenue sources and more of that discussion. I feel like you guys know more than all of us, and we're the ones that have to put our hand up or down and take that heat when the taxpayers push back.
Please.
I completely agree with you.
Excellent.
We
Okay,
need-
next.
We need
That's what I want to hear.
Okay.
we need to do a better job talking about service levels and what we're aiming for and what that looks like. And when I talk about it as a finance person, the people at the province understand me because we're talking about it in a different way in order to maintain service levels and make sure that it meets their legislative requirements. Maybe there's something lost in translation there, but absolutely, what are we aiming for? What target service levels is very, very important. And so my apologies, I'm going to talk about it quantitatively. So how much should we be investing in our facilities? Right now, I can take the quantity of the facilities over the current population and say, today it looks like this. And if we're going to grow by X, then if we want to keep pace with that and have the same capacity that we have today to service that demand, then we need to make these investments. And it's not that simple, right? You always plan beyond that.
But I don't think we've really collectively as a community, as a council, as a staff complement had those discussions, right?
No.
We don't, we just continue to sort of allow the train to move down the tracks.
And some of the measures are easier. So how fast does police and fire respond? And is that getting better or worse? How good of a job are we doing with risk reduction on the 6 areas of risk that we're managing? There's a list of about 10 that we track, and some of them are in the OCP, some of them aren't. The hectares of parkland per capita is in the OCP, for example. So yeah, we need to have a conversation about service levels. That's the longer term. Right now, we're very much focused on the near term to balance the budget, as you say. But setting that longer term vision through service levels would be a much better place to start.
Councilor Bob?
Thank you. Rick, thank you to your team and you for putting this together. When I read this report, there's a couple of keywords that come to mind. Balanced and reasoned approach. We're trying to maintain service levels, whatever definition you use, while keeping our property tax increase to a minimum. And that was a council directive to staff to do that. So I appreciate it. But also to me, it's just not one element. We're building community. And, for example, I don't believe we should, and we cannot, put every spare dime that we have into affordable housing. We need to look at the bigger picture to make sure we have a balanced approach. And another word that comes to mind is staying focused. I look at page 31, the bottom of the page. It says, should council identify additional projects that it wants to move forward, reductions to the plan will either need to be required or the property tax rate will need to be revised or revisited. I hear Councilor Murray, we need to kind of live within our means, and part of that is making sure that we don't get distracted throughout the year, stay focused. Also, I know we have to make some hard choices, and both by staff and council, and I have some additional questions. You talked about reserves, and you mentioned that reserves will help stabilize. What's the plan to replenish the reserves?
There are two types.
1.5%.
There's two types of reserves. There's
Okay.
our capital reserves, which are set aside for the ongoing steady state replacement of our infrastructure. And then we have what we refer to as operating and risk management reserves, including stabilizing rates. And so those are to address issues that come up, like the one that we've been talking about. And so they're in place for a limited period of time, and when they're exhausted, they've served their purpose. But risks are emerging all the time, and so we continually monitor what that looks like, and we continually adjust what our operating and risk management reserves need to be to address those issues.
Would you agree that we're in relatively good shape as a municipalities because we do have the reserves?
I think we're in reasonable shape. our targets are saying we should have more. And I think that the staff here are quite capable of addressing the risks and adjusting the plan to get to where we need to go and seeking direction from council to do that.
So I'm looking at some of the changes or adjustments. And of course, your eyes get pulled to the large numbers, but I also look at, response to senior government downloading. It says identify external funding for fire department's high school CPR training programs, $25,000. Surely we can find $25,000 for this program. That's probably really relevant to a community that's
So just explain where the staff team is at. Staff have put forward adjustments that they feel are that they can realize. And we've made a commitment as a team that if we can't realize those adjustments, that we'll find substitutes to make those changes.
overall, I think, I know there's some comments about transparency. I'd like to look at it that this plan is probably based on the best available information we have while striving to meet the targets that are set by council. I do recognize that there's a lot of deferrals and that poses some risk because deferred maintenance, either pay me now or pay me more later. So that's a risk.
Yeah.
I know you understand that, but I am concerned that, we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And I think the plan recognizes that and tries to mitigate as best as possible. But I think this is something that we have to be very on top of to make sure we stay focused. And, being on the finance and audit committee, I know we get a little more exposure to this. So I think that's something that we'll be watching closely. But so far, so good. Thank you.
I just want to follow up because you mentioned housing, and earlier we were talking about service levels and targets. I know since we've started tracking social and supportive housing and the number of units that we've had, that we've recently, I believe, hit a milestone that's close to 5%. When we look at the inventory of our social and supportive housing over our total housing. So we have to verify those numbers because it's early days, but we are approaching a number that I believe is above the regional average. And then the question is why? And we haven't really gotten there about why we should be at 5 or should it be 10 or should it be less? And then so it's just another good example of what the service level should be. What should we be striving for? And I can share and because I do get out and meet with the GMs and directors, and I recently met with the officer in charge, and one of the conversations is about why we only have this many members. Why can't we get more members? And one of the reasons it's cited is that it's so hard to get here and it's so expensive to live here. And those remarks would better come from Mayor Little because he's chair of that committee, but I'm just trying to share that the target service levels matter, and understanding why we need to get there matters. And so I think we're still working on that.
Thank you. Councillor Back.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Rick, for the presentation. You always do an excellent job of laying it out, and this budget, just like all budgets in recent years, is particularly challenging. I just wanted to look at the capital plan and address a couple of things. The first one being parks and open space. When I see the $24.4 million reduction over 5 years, recognizing some of that's in the outer years, but what are some of those things that people are going to notice just by seeing in parks and facilities that they use?
Carolyn can speak to that. I will say that there is a provision for additional investment in parks through that strategic facilities plan. There are park washrooms that are not reflected there yet, but they will be once the plan is amended. So that's going to happen. I know that there were some park improvements that were deferred. I don't have that list in front of me, but perhaps
I
Caroline.
don't feel like you have to address, everything, but if there's just a couple of high level things that you see as being deferred, I think just coming off the discussion that we had last night about the dogs and parks and people's strategy, I think, I'd like to know where we're actually making cuts here to parks.
Yeah, I think at a high level, the parks team, we're really endeavoring to, do the best we can with.
Nice and loud, Ms. Jackson.
Oh, sorry, to do the best we can with the resources that we have available. So what our plan is to really just focus on the high profile parks and landscapes. And so it's possible that some of the parks that are less high profile might receive a little bit less attention. And then just picking up on some of the comments around deferred maintenance, we would be deferring some maintenance, and that would, have implications obviously in terms of long-term asset sustainability. So at a high level, that's kind of what the.
Okay, I would just express caution that, parks are just some of the most visible things that people encounter in their day-to-day life and what they value so much about our community. And sometimes it's little things, and hopefully we can stay on top of all those little things that people do see, maintenance issues and whatnot. And that includes in some of the smaller parks as well as the more larger high profile. I think the other one that stands out for me, and also being on the Climate Action Committee, is the reduction in the 5-year plan under climate action. Now, I know a lot of the climate initiatives fall under different categories, but what specifically under climate action do you think we'd be seeing a reduction in?
The two main items under that category are less investment in our forest resilience program, which is taking a sort of more proactive approach with hazard trees and wildfire risk reduction. And then the other piece is just deferring some investments in EV public charging infrastructure.
Okay. Overall, I would just say I support the plan, and I do support the target of 3.5% property tax increase. And some of the other measures that we can do to look at, generating revenue. I've mentioned the sponsorship policy a number of times, and I know that there's a draft that's been created, so I look forward to that discussion upcoming. I heard Councillor Pope's comments about the Lynn Valley Youth Center, and that I think is a small amount of funding that could really make a positive impact for youth in Lynn Valley. So I would like to see that included. I would just say generally I'm concerned about some of the reductions in the outer years, but I recognize there's just a lot of unknowns right now, and I think our finance staff have done an excellent job in putting together a balanced plan. So thank you.
Thank you. I was just gonna ask you, Rick, I have sort of some thoughts rolling around in my head. Maybe they're better for a Scotch conversation away from this, but I think it is background to what we're all facing. And I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. That, do conservative fiscal policies sometimes make it harder for us to make fiscal conservative decisions? And the question is, as municipalities have had more obligations to squirrel away reserves, and sometimes we've gone over and above what's required of us. So you have depreciation, you have asset retirement obligations, you have our own policies where we've been collecting asset renewal funds going back to 2004, a little bit each year to build up reserves to be able to place that. If you expand that across all of the infrastructure building bodies, the municipalities, the regional districts, the province, the feds, and we all take these positions where we're going to squirrel away the money ahead of time. Does that have the net effect of making everything more expensive? In that when you have to make the decision to replace something, you've got 85%, 90% of the money squirreled away. Therefore, it's actually 20% higher than you thought. Okay, well, this was the plan all the way along. We've got most of the money, and you go ahead and you make the decision. Go ahead. So are our own conservative fiscal policies making it harder for us to push prices down, push our costs down on the back end, in your view?
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think you have to look at it again, across a multi-generational lens, is it fair to everybody? And an argument might be made that with shorter asset life and conservative policies, that perhaps the burden is falling too heavy at some point this generation. The argument's been made that we're still catching up, and so we're not quite there yet. But if you look at the policies, as you're saying, our debt levels are very low. Our set-asides are growing. We don't target a percentage of what our replacement value is. We target full replacement value, so full set-aside. And that is out there as the holy grail of what we're all looking at achieving at the local government level. And so maybe there's some room for more flexibility there. There's been some discussion about when we invest in new assets, like the new Lynn Creek Community Center, new Lionsgate Community Center, new artificial turf fields, and other investments that the community needed, that rather than pay for it twice the first life, use a 50% target. So we have a $30 million rec center, it's paid for through development. Should we really start setting aside full replacement value in year one, which is what finance people want? Or should we say first life, no, we'll target 50%, and over a longer period of time, we'll achieve this sustainable funding level? So I think the answer is somewhere in the middle, that we need to strike a balance that achieves fairness across the generations. It doesn't burden one generation more than another. That's something we need to work on.
It's interesting, yeah, if you break it up in generations like that, the first generation in North Vancouver just didn't have community amenity. Then you did land sale program through the 50s to the 70s that paid for that next generation of amenities. And then with the cooperation of a hot market, you use development growth and density to pay for the next generation of infrastructure. What does it look like to pay for the replacement of the infrastructure that we have, state-of-the-art repair? If you don't have land sales as an opportunity, the federal government has cut DCCs and the provincial government has cut DCCs and other sources of funding to municipalities. So what does it look like if you don't have density as a source of funding and you don't have land sales as a source of funding? How do you shift to the tax base over time to pay for the replacement of it? And is it just simply our 1%, 1.5% that we've already been doing is effectively that transfer to the tax base?
I think we need to look at the various options, come up with a few scenarios for consideration, comment on whether or not those scenarios achieve that equity, and see what it looks like. We have not done that. We've been very much focused on we have over $4 billion worth of infrastructure, and we need to set aside this much money. And so yes, that's something we could look at from a more complicated lens than we currently are to address the fairness issue.
Food for thought. There you go. Councillor Forbes, I think I saw your hand, and then Councillor Murray.
I've said it before, I'm in favor of the 3.5, and I'm really looking forward to the 17 more than kind of what was here, because I kind of know this stuff. But just to put it out on the table, what is our debt? Because that's one of the things that we've done. We've kept it down very, very low.
Yeah.
So that's an advantage that we have. But what is it currently?
I think the debt servicing is in the range of 4 and going 4 million, going up this spring. So per year, I think it peaks at 8 to 9 over the plan. So total borrowing, as Mary Little was indicating, approaches 90 million. We definitely need to bring back a debt policy at some point and talk about amortization periods and limits. But overall, our debt is considered quite low. We could borrow up to 25% of our ongoing revenue, currently under 5%, and will remain that way over this plan.
trying to give you kudos where you deserve them, that it's good that we did that. I just also wanted to mention, you have the 3 items that you sort of highlighted on where possible other financial impacts or priorities could be changed on page 36. And the first one, I agree with divest assets with lower public benefits. I think we need to really seriously do that because there are some assets we have, and I'm not going to single them out, but you get certain maybe smaller core groups want that asset maintained. And I think we need to do a deeper dive on that to understand what is the ROI on that really? Like, is it time to unload it, go for something different, or not just keep maintaining? And sometimes we get influenced by the public when they come, we have certain groups that come speak to certain things. So I think we need to do a deeper dive and a broader dive on that. I'd really like that. Increasing paid parking in the high demand locations. Nobody likes paid parking. So I don't know how well that will go over, but you do make the point that the local residents have a pass. So it's going to be the people who come here to use our facilities and our parks. They're the ones that are actually paying for it, and I think that's smart. And the other thing you've got on here is moves to the biweekly garbage collection, and we went through sort of a bit of a round of that before Christmas, and it's popular with some and really unpopular with others. But I do think, I mean, I had an email just recently that said to me, as long as you keep the organics weekly. So that's kind of an in-between halfway mark. So anyway, I would look forward to a longer conversation on that as well. Otherwise, I think it's really good, and I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pope, would you refer? No, you spoke at the top, so it's Councillor Murray, then Councillor Pope.
I spoke after Councillor Pope, so she can go ahead.
You're both second time
Okay.
speakers.
You said a rec facility for 30 million. Was that the Lord Lynn one?
We're both in the Lionsgate and Lynn Creek were both.
Yeah, because I think it was developer contribution of 8 million, and then we threw another 8 in or something like that to actually outfit. So, nothing's free, right? We're paying for everything. We have to keep in mind too, Metro's debt ceiling. We're borrowing a lot of money too, and those projects are coming in obviously very high. We've become, the region has become, these were big conversations in the city of Vancouver, addicted to the ability of developing and then paying for things. And, to the mayor's point, how do we deal with that in the future when those options are not there anymore? And those options are actually driving us into this place of affordability. I think you talked about, RCMP or the complement of the RCMP, the FTEs, and why is it challenging to get people here because it's expensive? Well, Squamish is expensive. Squamish used to be, a very reasonable place not very long ago, several years ago, it was an affordable place to live. So I just don't know if we can keep using that as a reason to say we can't get, certain things because we're so expensive, or people don't want to work here because it's so expensive to live. We have a lot of people that live in this community that work in this municipality and work in various school districts and what have you. And certainly, housing has changed. There's a huge number of units that are available right now, mainly because of federal decisions in regards to international students, foreign immigration, and those things are all part of this as well. And it's, I remember Nicole DeVoe, our former CFO, you remember her, when we were talking about the tax rates, they would bring in that calculator and you could change numbers on the screen in real time. And we could see by moving a number what it would look like for each of the classes. And I long to have that mechanism with what we're dealing with right now. You change international students. What does that look? How does that change the housing? You restrict short-term rentals. in housing that you're building, how does that change affordability and the availability of units? Because I often feel that we become static and we don't understand what's happening in real time because we're focusing on the issue at hand and we're not maybe experiencing what's going on in the market necessarily. I think our planning department met with some local commercial realtors recently to talk about some zoning. And, they were saying, if you change this area from heavy industrial, because it's not really a heavy industrial area anymore, and maybe looked at light industrial, you'd lower the price per square foot of those units, and there would be more opportunity for business. And so those are the kinds of things that we have to look at quite seriously before we, just continue to move down the road as we always have. And really think about what that future is going to look like, because I think density was seen as a way to solve so many of these problems, and it's actually created an enormous level of problems that is very difficult to achieve right now. And I agree with Councillor Ma, like we keep talking about the affordable housing, but just those couple of things that the provincial government and the federal government did changed quite quickly, almost overnight, affordability in this community and throughout the province, throughout the country. If we look back 15 years, when we passed that official community plan, we put no restrictions on those strata units as far as rental went. Right away, we began to see people buying floors of towers, not one unit, not two units, but multiple floors, and using them as investment opportunities to make money because they could. Let's buy 5 condos and rent them out for $350 a night on Airbnb. We'll make a fortune. And they did. Why would they rent it for $1,000 when they could rent it for $500 a night? And we didn't pivot. It came up, it was discussed, and we didn't change it. We didn't turn back because we were so convinced that this was the way to go, and this was gonna make the seniors move out into the condos and then open up all these single family homes, and all these families were gonna move in. Just like I think the previous federal government under Trudeau thought, well, we'll just bring a whole bunch of immigrants over from other countries and we'll do what happened in the 1950s. It just didn't happen. And so I think that's part of the issue with all of this is that, we've become accustomed in the last, 15 years to having someone else pay for all this stuff. And we've got to figure out how we pay for it ourselves. And I appreciate your point, Mayor Little, and that I hope it's a good bottle of scotch because I'll join you in that conversation because it really is going to be very interesting to see in a few generations. How did my grandfather buy 3 acres on Panorama Drive for $87? And now a condo's worth over $1 million down the street, like crazy. And we're certainly not making, that increase in our wages or, and everything costs. I went to Costco today, a pack of stew beef for stew, 6 months ago, $27. Today, $49 for the same pack of meat, $50 for a pack of chuck beef cut up. Like it's absolutely insane what is happening with the value of everything. And I think we need a complete review, Mr. New CAO. If you could get that done by Friday at noon, I'd appreciate it.
It only took an hour for her to bring that up.
Yeah, and but we do need a whole review about what we're doing because we're heading into a place of abyss, I think, and it's very concerning.
Thank you, Councillor Mary. Okay, next up, I've got Councillor Paul.
Just a couple of housekeeping things concerning communications. As you know, I'm really adamant about public engagement and transparency. And I'm just looking at our website and I noticed that there's nothing on the landing page that indicates the budget. And I think as we are in the budget process at this point, that we should have something on the landing page of dnb.org that people can link immediately to the budget pages. And when I go into it, I see that, and also, by the way, I think this should be promoted in our current comms materials that go out on our social channels and in other ways, that we are in the budget now, and we do want to hear from the public on what they think of it. And so with that in mind, I think that, can we post this document online now, this 3.1 agenda item that we've been discussing, council priorities and budget? I know it's in the agenda,
Yeah.
but it's, you know how hard it is to find stuff in the listing of agendas and drill down on exact topics. So that would be super helpful, I think, if we could post this online. And then the dates coming up, it says here that the draft workbook is coming out February 17th. But will it be published online February 10th as we normally do, like 1 week before?
Unfortunately, it's going to be on the table. We did move to having it available a week in advance, but it's going to be on the table on the 17th.
So that's not giving the public much time to.
It's
and
prior-
or-
That's introduction.
It's introduction of the booklet to
I know,
council.
but you know how these things go, right? Like the introduction, you're expecting council to give feedback, so
No, not feedback.
it's just the introduction?
Just receipt of the book. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, and so then.
We all do it anyway, fastest fingers to find
Yeah.
something on there, but no, that is the purpose of it, is that there's no pressure on you to go and do that. Other people consume the information in different ways, and so
But
it's
I just
introduced.
know, based on the few years that I've seen this thing come forward, that on that day, everybody's gonna be making their grand speeches about, you know, whatever issues they care deeply about. And I think we need to be better prepared for that. And
I
not
agree with
just-
you. We need to get it out sooner, and it needs to be December, not February. Yeah.
Well, is there anything you could do to get it to us a few days early?
We're pushing the team very, very hard as it is, so we can see if we can get it out.
Like even on the weekend, so I have some chance to look at it? Would be super helpful. If it's
Check
gonna
with
come
the
out
team.
Monday anyway, then surely the weekend, it'll be prepared on Friday. That would be super helpful to me. And also, I would like to see us make mention that even though we say public input begins February 18th, it actually could start now. Like really, the public can provide input at any time on what we're doing. And I think that needs to be stated. And what also needs to be stated is they don't just need, it's good that we say at the very bottom of the page, public input helps shape the budget. And then we provide an email where they can provide their comments on that. But I think that we need to be also saying, or you could show up you could come to a council meeting at any time and have this much time to speak. Or you can appear virtually and/or link it to the page that describes how people can appear in person. And the one other quick housekeeping item I had is just on this page with the 2026 environmental scan of affecting factors. And I raised this with you once before, and I know it got changed on some other documents, but it didn't on this one. And that is the quote, growing and aging community. So it's in regards to mentioning that there's an aging community and that's causing cost pressures, which I don't think it is. Yes, can you fix that?
I think you're right. They're changing needs. It's not a cost driver. That slide is just indicating what's outside of our control. And the aging community is outside of our control, but you're right. It's changing demand. It's not driving costs.
Right, so could we fix that? Because it does,
We did fix
it
the
sort of has a negative implication that our growing community is costing us more money, which I don't think it is. So unless we want to quantify that in some way, in some further document.
Maybe we can add some explanatory text there. I'll talk to communications. Yes.
Speaking of talking to communications, there were a few things raised in there. What can we do to elevate the awareness that this is a current discussion between here and those times?
So through you, Mayor Little, so typically, in the past, what communications has done is we really focus, once the budget is introduced, we've got a lot of our materials ready to go. And then based on the conversation, if there is one, at time of introduction, we quickly revise our materials, and then we do quite a strong push to everybody to let them know that the public engagement period is open. In the past, what we have found is that condensing it down to a tighter timeline encourages more people to respond. We can certainly put it on the homepage now. We can certainly open it up if that's what all of council would like. Typically, people react to a deadline, right? So that's where the time frame of binding it tends to be helpful. But if council would like a different approach, we can certainly do that.
I'm sorry, did you just say if that's what all of council would like? Because do we need to take a vote on directing communications to provide more public information?
We want to make it easy for people to find it as a current discussion, and if the tools that are available to us, like push notification or anything, just to remind people of the dates, to point to where the resources are.
Well, all the things that I just mentioned, including the fact that we want on the landing page, something that shows very clearly we're in budget, please give your feedback, here's the click through to the page. Like,
That's fair.
do I have to repeat all those things again? Like,
No, I think that has been received, and I'll work on that. But I totally agree. I've got Councillor Hanson, Councillor Mon, and Councillor Back. Councillor Hanson, please.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you to everyone for their comments. I didn't say so earlier, but thank you for all your good work. Mr. Nadler, thank you to your team, and I do support the 3.5%, and I do support the plan is put forward. I do think it strikes a reasonable balance. Changing topic areas and public safety, which I take to be the police and fire, is that public safety?
That's in the fire bylaws, hazard management.
So there's a $6 million reduction here, $6.1 million reduction. Perhaps you could talk about what that represents, what it is we're cutting there, but also, do you have any thoughts about potential savings with respect to policing costs in the district?
With respect to policing.
Policing costs.
So start with the reductions. So these are the capital reductions that you're mentioning?
That's right, yeah, I'm taking that from the capital plan adjustments. Mine is $6.1 million for public safety.
Just pull that up here. So, again, like many of the lines in there, it relates to facilities work. There are asset management planning. There are improvements required on the remaining fire stations. So in this plan, that work is deferred, but the planning for that work doesn't stop. And there is an intention to bring forward some incremental measures through the financial plan amendment, and Ms. Chevalier could speak to that.
Through your worship, I think it might be helpful to understand that a lot of the deferral related to facilities is showing up on those different lines. So some of the deferral that Councillor Back was mentioning of parks is related to facilities, and in this case, I'm thinking it's a lot of the fire halls. And so with our approach, we actually do have in the plan some fully funded renewal projects, right? We are going to be doing critical renewal. We went through our asset management plan and came up with what we should do, and then really focus on what we must do. And the must do does include renewal of facilities, but in some cases, what we really should be doing is replacing those facilities. And so in that case, that was deferred out, and we decided to just focus on critical renewal. So we'll still be seeing work in those buildings, but it's not necessarily taking care of that replacement. So that's showing as that deferral. And then there's other large portion of projects where we've just requested partial funding to get started on scoping or options, get a better sense of what we need to be spending. And our intention is that that provision Rick has mentioned we will apply that to the most urgent, and we come back about how we apply that provision. And some of that will also go to fire facilities or parks, projects and things, including this year, as we kind of work through really confirming the scope and the options on this. So does that help?
Mr. Denlick, is there any way we can have greater cost efficiency with respect to policing in the district? What are your thoughts?
We have been working directly with Officer Mainwaring through the police committee on lowering overtime costs. So there's been progress. We've seen progress on that, and working very closely with them on just getting greater clarity on the cost drivers. Meeting with the D division staff. We did contain the RCMP, North Van Detachment, the RCMP to inflation, and so they're working within that number. But on the flip side, we do need to get staffing levels for the detachment back up to an appropriate level, and so they're working with the police committee on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Next, I've got Councillor Mah.
Thank you. I think we all want to make sure information gets out to the community as soon as possible. But I just want to clarify something, Mr. Daniluk. Is this document ready to go, or based on discussions tonight, will you be making some edits before publishing?
Well, we'll definitely be making some changes to how things are communicated, but the document itself, the adjustments that are reflected in the materials before you are ready to go. Any changes to the budget that can be captured through the process and council deliberations. I don't see any.
I just want to make sure you have enough time to get, if there were revisions, to get the revisions done before sending it out. That's the only point.
And I think at this point it's best to prepare the materials based on the information before you, and then because there will likely be more questions and potential changes through the process, and then we leave those changes to council's deliberations process on March 9th, and then we move forward from there.
Good, thank you. Next, I've got Councillor Back.
Yeah, thank you. I will add my support for getting this on our website at the very least as soon as we can. I just looked at Port Coquitlam's website. They do for some things once in a while, and they have it front and center on the homepage. So I think just having that there to begin with, and then we can certainly ramp it up as we get closer. But having it there with a clear timeline of the process would be should be done as soon as we can. I wanted to comment on Ron Andrews and Karen Magnuson replacement. I saw in the plan, I think there's some scoping work plan. I wonder if staff could comment just on where that's at and kind of where it fits in the timeline, 5 years.
Yes, through worship. For Ron Andrews and for Karen Magnuson, we've put in money for scoping and feasibility studies for the replacement of Ron Andrews, and then more of like a renewal and expansion of Karen Magnuson is the approach right now, and that's a very early stages, waiting the money in this budget to do those studies. Really confirming and bringing forward a stage, what will be the program, if we're replacing Ron Andrews on that site, all of that needs to still be explored as part of that.
What sort of time frame are we looking at for those?
Well, there's no funding in the plan for the detailed design or construction of that, so it's outside of the 5-year plan. There is some renewal money, so we are looking at some critical renewal at Karen Magnuson. I know that will happen, and the next interim works that we can move forward with on that. So yeah, it's very much a puzzle that we're excited.
It seems to me that both of those facilities should be prioritized more. I do hear it from people in the community somewhat regularly on both of those facilities, and it does feel like we continue to push them out. And I recognize why, the financial challenges, but I would just say that I think that they should be a little bit more of a priority in terms of starting the conversation and kind of looking at what those facilities might look like in the future. They might look different, right?
Yeah, and we are our intent is to really embark on that feasibility options this year and bring that back and start that
Okay.
conversation. So, potentially a new council would, then, get it into the.
Start those
plan.
discussions.
Yeah, so that is the intent of this money, is to really start that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Kids won't be eager about that one because Ron Andrews is their favorite because it's quieter, darker, and colder,
Darker.
and which is better for lane swimming and other
That's true.
things, so. Councillor Cole.
Thank you. In response to Councillor Hanson's question about thoughts on reducing policing costs, I have some thoughts, and I just want to remind everyone of what I have stated previously, which is that we know that officers spend up to half their time responding to mental health calls, and that other communities have found ways to reduce costs by having mental health emergency calls go to a different type of service. And I believe our new CAO has actually done some work on investigating this. So I would be very interested in hearing what we could do on that front, or at least start engaging in the discussions on it, because it would make a significant difference to RCMP resources and our $5 million in overtime costs.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Mary.
Well, just on that question of RCMP and the overtime, I'm wondering what the recent decision by the provincial government in regards to canceling the decrim is going to do to policing costs. And I'm wondering, have you guys talked about that at the policing committee, or how we're gonna handle that one? We are, embarking on building supportive housing, and hopefully we don't have a lot of challenges, but that's not been the case around the region in some of them. And with this recent cancellation, one would assume that those costs are going to increase because we're going to need our CMP officers actually dealing with crimes instead of the former situation that we found ourselves in. So
It's definitely an aspect of it that is the number of calls, but there's also an aspect of it that the policy on overtime. And so the challenge we face right now is that there's a big incentive in place to refuse overtime in your own community and then take overtime in other jurisdictions. And so when you are doing overtime out of your jurisdiction, you get paid from the time you leave your driveway to the time you get back to your driveway. You get your meals covered, and you get to drop the files onto someone else at the end of the day. And so there may be a pattern taking place where people are intentionally refusing local overtime in order to make it so that there's a healthier pool of out of jurisdiction overtime for people. And it's a big problem. I know with the collective bargaining agreement that they've just entered into hasn't addressed this issue, and it's something that the only mechanism we have to address it within the current RCMP contract is to do it as a punishment. Which is not what people want to do, but basically if someone is overusing the overtime system, we can stop them from doing overtime in other jurisdictions, but it's very much seen as a career punishment to someone to do it. And so some of it is call-outs, some of it is the current policy that there's a strategy being used to exploit it, we'll say. And so part of getting our overtime down is getting more local officers so that we're not generating that out of jurisdiction demand in the system, which we currently are. So there is a relationship to calls, but there's also very clear things that we can fix and address with the right labor responses, we'll say.
and then the issues of the decrim.
We haven't had that discussion with our group. I mean, obviously, we were very active at the time when it was, the decrim pieces came up in January of, I want to say 03. And that was when, I don't think the provincial government understood how we used the possession rules. They wanted to get rid of the stigma on possession, but I don't think they realized that we used possession rules to manage consumption. So we weren't running around giving tickets to people for carrying drugs on them. We were really doing two things. One, if they were consuming in an unsafe place at a school, at a library, at a public plaza, we were using the consumption regulation the possession regulation to stop consumption. And so when they got rid of possession, we lost our ability to manage where. The other piece that was just really frustrating for the police was because you were no longer using the possession regulations, they had to return, in many cases, poison drug supplies back to the person when they left custody. So they would have to, as chain of evidence, collect what we knew to be poison drug supply, and actually, when the person was released back, had to give it back to the person. And so this was a huge failure of public policy. We're very glad that the province has been coming back from that, but it's, I don't know how it translated into actual call-out hours or how much time they spend on each particular call-out, but it's
just quite different from 2003 to now with the increase in fentanyl and what's going on in the streets. Like it's a totally different place, and so I think there are going to be impacts. And just one other thing, I just wanted to, we talk about land development but it's always around housing. It's always around housing, and we have very few conversations about business, our business community, what we're doing to support them, what we're not doing, what some of our zoning regulations are restricting, different zones. We're redoing our zoning bylaw, and we're focusing a lot on housing, single family zones, but we also really need to talk about business. And, we do have some areas in the municipality that could accommodate more business and keep actually businesses here that are being, there's some pressure being put on some businesses, trying to push them off the North Shore. And I think that's something that we really need to focus on and put some time and energy in, because those businesses are going to help us retain our sustainability as well. And we don't often pivot in that direction. We may talk about, the Port Property Tax Act and big industry and, what they do or don't do, and what we've lost. But there's a lot of small business out there, and there's a lot of local businesses that there's a massive impact to us if they go. And we have to make sure that we look after those businesses and look at opportunities to maintain them when they are under pressure. So I'd like to have those conversations as well going forward. I think that's.
We've had a good discussion. I don't see any other speakers. I'll just, I don't think I actually said in the time this spoke that I am supportive of budget scenario 1 at this time. And so with no further speakers, it's just receipt. Yeah, okay. So I'll move budget scenario 1, second by Councillor Back. Any other discussion on the motion? Fair to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried.